Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Welcome to In the City, Bloomberg's podcast focusing on the stories shaping the City of London. I'm Francine and Lacqua.
And I'm Allegra Stratton.
And this week, Allegra, our episode could not be more in the city. I mean, it's really quintessentially British. It's quintessentially London because we speak to the Lord Mayor of London, which is not to be confused with the Mayor of London.
No, indeed. And he's a neighbour. So he's the 696th Lord Mayor. So it's a role and an institution that goes back a very long time. And where Fran and I are sitting right now, if we look to our left or you to your right, Fran, we can see his abode. And he will go around the world saying that we London are open for business and making the case, I suppose, to elected officials as well in Westminster.
So for this conversation, we're going to hear from the Lord Mayor of the City of London, Alderman Alastair King. We'll talk to him about his priorities for the role and what he thinks are the biggest challenges and opportunities facing London right now.
Welcome to the City of London.
The City of London.
The next station is Bank. Please mind the gap between the train and the platform.
The financial heart of the country.
The city.
The City.
Welcome to In the City.
Stand clear of the doors, please.
Lord Mayor, welcome to In the City.
Lovely to be here, Francine.
Day 2 in the job.
First real proper working day, so great fun.
So how does it start?
Today or
Your day.
the day?
Your day. How does your day start in the morning and when does it end?
We've just had the Lord Mayor's show, an awful lot of thank yous to be done after that Lord Mayor's show. So my day today started writing an awful lot of thank you letters, which was because people have been so remarkably supportive and generous for that. And then I've had a whole load of orientation sessions with IT and all the rest of it, which has been good. And then it's lovely then to come and speak to you, which is fantastic.
And we're your neighbour as well. We can see your new house from this podcast studio. Mansion house.
I will try not to be noisy neighbours and cause you all sorts of problems.
What about your dog, though?
The dog, well, you never
Yapping
know.
away.
It depends if I fed her properly.
Tell us about your agenda.
As Lord Mayor, you're the Global Ambassador for the United Kingdom's financial, professional, legal and maritime services. And my view is that it's a nationwide role. It's not just London. So for those sectors, you've got a titular head for all those sectors nationwide. I think there's a feeling over the course of the last few years that London is not quite firing on all the cylinders that it used to. And I think that therefore, in footballing terms, there's this idea that it's an injured striker just coming back from injury. It's lost a yard of pace. And I think my role during the course of the year is to try and claw back as much of that yard of pace as I possibly can. And I think if I can end the year with a feeling that we could all look at each other in the eye and think that, yes, the city is firing on more cylinders than it was at the beginning of the year, I would view that to be a success.
Not easy, because you're probably going to be fighting on multiple fronts.
Fronts.
You could see tariffs from the US, which you could see deregulation from the US, which puts banks here in the UK at a disadvantage. You also have this new budget, which actually does a lot to non-doms. So you could see also, if not an exodus, certainly a lot of wealthy people leaving the UK, including bankers.
It's true. I think I'm going to concentrate on 3 areas where I think I can make a real difference. One is regulatory reform, really working with the new government to try and get a better set of regulations, a sort of better fitting, smarter set of regulations. But I think regulatory reform, as you all know, that can take 5 years, it could take 10 years, it could never happen. So therefore, an important element is my second element, which is the mindset reform. It's trying to say, don't wait for the regulatory reform to occur. Get on and do the get on the plane tomorrow. Don't wait for it all to happen on the regulatory reform side. Get on planes, bang on doors. Go to where the economies are growing at 5, 6, 7% around the world. We've got a real opportunity there because so often those countries, they want to buy what we have to sell, the expertise that we have in London. And I think the missing ingredient is to a degree of confidence. We've developed this sort of safetyism sort of mentality here in London, and I just think that we need to, and in the United Kingdom, I think we need to get off and do things and go and attack new markets. The second element of that, I think, also is technological investment. We've in the incredible age of the white heat of the new technologies, all sorts of new technology suites are available to us. If we're serious about being a global centre in relation to financial, professional, legal, maritime services, we've got to be early adopters of the new technologies, and that's a great opportunity for us. And the third element is the communities. London is this extraordinary world city, all these incredible communities and diasporas are represented here. We've got this advantage that no other city has. Let's use those incredible, celebrate those communities, ask them to double down in relation to their commitment to London, their commitment to the sectors we've talked about, and then also to encourage their nieces, their nephews, their children of their friends to get into financial, professional, legal, maritime services, because it's from those communities that will power the city for the next 25 years.
I like this phrase, get on the plane and go and bang on doors in other countries. Do you think it's not been happening, or do you think that it's not been happening as much as it should have?
Well, I think it's not been happening as much as it should have been. I think that's right. I think there are a number of countries that are put on the too difficult list, and I think that there are. Like
which ones?
I think some of the Far Eastern countries have been put on that. It's tough places to do business. It's not necessarily the easiest place to get to, but I just think that there is nothing to beat the fact of actually getting on the plane, going to press the flesh, and trying to get some mandates. And I think that's something that, to a degree, we used to do all the time. And I just sense we've got out of the habit in some respect.
But this would be attracting capital to the UK, or would it be getting, foreign entities to list in the UK?
I see my role as Lord Mayor would be the cheerleader in chief for the sectors we've talked about. I think a cheerleader has two elements to the role. One is effectively to tell the world how brilliant London is and the United Kingdom is, but also to tell home team, sort of get on with it, raise your game. And so therefore I think, in answer to your question, we're looking for foreign direct investment into the United Kingdom in relation to the sectors we've talked about, but also it's to tell the home team here in Britain, expand your horizons. So it's a two-way thing.
How difficult is it to deregulate when you don't know what the US does? I mean, there's been a number of papers from the Bank of England that have been published recently on Basel II, on some of the safeguarding of banks. When Donald Trump gets in the White House and he deregulates everything, it's very difficult for the UK to be seen as sticking to its guns.
That's understood, but I think that we should not use that as an excuse to do nothing and waiting for the changes to happen in America. We're too reactive when it comes to regulatory change. I think we should have plot a course and get on with it. If there needs to be some tweaking later on, so be it, because of external forces. But I think what I wouldn't want to see is that regulatory reform is delayed because of what might happen elsewhere.
But would you not lose business if there's no regulation in the US and the UK feels like it's being over-regulated?
No, I mean, I think that there is the regulatory status of the United Kingdom is admired. I think that we are viewed as a safe place to do business, and we should not lose that. It is absolutely essential we don't. And I think also we shouldn't be involved in any races to the bottom of anything. I think we need to keep our standards high and respected around the world. But I think there's also a balance to be struck, obviously, because we need to get some business in again. And also there are a whole number of places around the world that don't necessarily want to do business in the United States, and they may want to do business here in the United Kingdom.
You talked about standards. What's your instinctive feel about a company like Shein that might possibly list? Loads of people in the government seem to really want it to list, even though all of us in this room, and indeed probably in the government too, a lot of the aspects of that company are going to be challenging for their other bits of their agenda.
I don't want to get drawn on a particular company. I think that because I'm there as the global ambassador for the whole sector in general, I want to see the London Stock Exchange thrive. We want to see a pipeline of fantastic new listings from around the world. And I think, therefore, we need to be encouraging a whole load of listings to come.
How do you strike the balance between, listings at all cost or the good type of listings?
And I think to go back to my point about standards, I think we've got to maintain our standards and we've got to maintain respect around the world. But I just sort of sense, again, a balance to be struck. But I think we need to make London the most attractive place to list that we possibly can. And I think we've done it before. We're 15 years ago, so we were a remarkably attractive place to list. We struck that right balance. Somehow we've got out of kilter over the course of the last 15 years.
Lord Mayor, can you pinpoint what you think happened in the last 15 years? And we've discussed this many times on the podcast. Partly it's because actually 10, 15 years ago, we had a lot of Russian companies that could list quite easily. That's no longer the case. Partly it's also that the regulatory regime has changed, that we've put so much burden on regulators to say, well, you'll be held responsible, that they tend to say no instead of saying yes.
Yep, that's right. I think that a number of different factors. I think we've seen the recalibration of risk and the appetite for risk after the global financial crisis. We've certainly seen that, and there's, as I mentioned, a culture of safetyism has permeated through, partly because of slightly clumsy regulation. I think that's an element there. We've seen impacts in relation to Brexit. We've seen impacts in relation to COVID, and also impacts in relation to some of the political uncertainty that we've seen in the last 2-3 years or so. So I do sense that it's multifactorial. But having said, I say go back to what I was saying earlier. I think the solution in many cases, because the regulations that we have are they're not terrible. It's a confidence thing. I think that in order to get back to where we were, I think it's this idea of confidence. Hence the idea of, in my view, the sectors need a cheerleader in chief, which I would hope that the Lord Mayor can provide.
We should talk about whether stability has. I suppose that's one question. Has stability truly come to the UK? That was the narrative after the election. Huge majority for Labour, and it did feel. And again, in this studio, many guests have sort of talked about that sense of breathe. There's not the chaos of the previous Conservative administrations, but there was choppiness after this last budget, and then many companies concerned. We've got a story this week, a story on Bloomberg of hospitality industry feeling that this NICS increase is going to really, really hit them. We've seen Sainsbury's, Tesco's and so on. A real sense that certainly the national insurance increase is going to hit companies hard.
And certainly I'm hearing same sort of comments out there as well. My view is that there are elements, certainly in relation to the sectors that I'm interested in, financial, professional, legal, maritime services. Again, I think that there's nothing in the budget there that should dissuade them from going off to get the new markets that we need in order to grow.
But does it deter, wealthy non-doms from staying here because of the inheritance tax, probably more than non-doms? And does that mean that you automatically lose movers and shakers in the City of London?
I think that, and certainly among my friends, some people have left. I think that's undoubtedly the case.
Where have they gone to?
Interestingly, to a number of different places. Some have gone to Italy, some have gone to Dubai, some of them have gone to Switzerland. But having said that, very interestingly, and then my point here is that they haven't moved their businesses. So they have individually moved. But effectively, are you going to move your business? Absolutely not. And so therefore, we're going to keep our business here effectively, and which is important because the businesses employ in some of their cases many hundreds of people. And do they have an intention to leave? No. And do they have an intention to reinvest into their UK-based businesses? Yes, they do. So I think that's the important element there. So I'm not downhearted in relation to the changes.
So we're actually recording this podcast on a Monday. It's being played out on a Thursday. And so Thursday evening is Mansion House speech.
Yes.
What would you put in there?
Well, I have the great joy to be hosting the Chancellor on the Mansion House speech, and 3 people speaking on that night, the Lord Mayor, the Chancellor and the Governor of the Bank of England. And so we're writing our speech sort of at the moment, which is great. So we will be putting some in there. I've certainly I've got some regulatory reform that I'll be suggesting to the Chancellor in relation to how to bring back the growth that we've been talking about, both on the short-term basis and also medium-term basis, plus also my message in relation to confidence. What can we do to build confidence within the sector? Because that doesn't need extra spending. It doesn't need anything, but it's just the fact of saying, look, there's what's stopping you, what's going on, what's out there to stop you, and I think that there might be perhaps some explanatory documents, particularly on the regulatory side. Regulations don't need to change, but perhaps a little bit of guidance there, particularly when you're dealing with with difficult jurisdictions. That's the sort of thing where a bit of guidance from government could go a long way. A tiny bit of effort on those departments' side could go a long way.
Is this what for sanctions or?
It's a sanction. It's more. It's
how to do business. As your example was Southeast Asia.
That's the sort of thing. Absolutely right. And again, I think there are some difficult jurisdictions in those, but goodness me, there's some attractive markets there, growing markets, and those are markets where British companies used to have an incredibly sort of strong position, and you just sort of sense that has been allowed to erode. And I think that's because of a degree of uncertainty back here in relation to what's permissible and is not. Therefore, a bit of guidance from some relevant departments, I think would go a long way.
Should we talk about pensions?
I was about to say mind
pensions.
reader.
Pensions. Me and Allegra are always on the same page.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Pensions, Lord Mayor. What do we need to change?
I think that there's a great deal. I think that it's something that my predecessor as Lord Mayor a couple of years ago, St. Nick Lyons, did something called the Mansion House Compact in relation to pension funds. Mansion House Compact effectively asking the top 11 pension funds to commit up to 5% of their assets into risk assets by 2030. I gave an interview last week, effectively asking the questions: are we going far enough? Are we going fast enough? And I think, therefore, it's a great idea. I think that there's the figure that we have made only a tiny inroad into that 5% so far. So therefore, do we need to sort of to push again? Me as Lord Mayor, I will be pushing those companies to go further and faster. I think it makes an awful lot of sense. But also, the idea of it's extraordinary, sort of structurally, that we're in a situation where Australia has 14 pension funds. We've got 21,000 pension funds. Imagine the duplication of fees and all the rest of inefficiencies when you've got 21,000 schemes out there. There needs to be sort of a really quite radical reform.
Lord Mayor, we want to ask you about the gold carriage in a second.
Second mind read moment.
We have to ask about the gold carriage. But before that, the budget actually is making a lot of businesses worry, right, because of the national insurance contributions. So does that impact pensions significantly? You can put 5% into national companies or startups, but if they have to pay a lot and so they can't grow as quickly, it's going to be counterproductive.
We are going to be talking with the government on a regular basis, and effectively we have a number of ideas, some of which I'll talk about in the Mansion House on Thursday with the Chancellor. I think there are a number of ways in which we're sort of saying, look, Chancellor, here are some ideas that the Treasury might want to take on. I'd love to come back and talk to you about those once we've mentioned it to government.
Okay, so
the carriage is all yours.
To me to ask the 6-year-old girl question. What was it like? Is it sort of, does it wobble around? Is it drafty?
One of my
Is it comfortable?
Who was in that carriage about just over 10 years ago. The axle broke during the course of the Lord Mayor show, so therefore it's been revamped over the course of the last few years, and is actually people warned me it wasn't very comfortable. It was perfectly comfortable.
Lovely.
And it's rather lovely.
For our international listeners, I mean, we're talking about a proper carriage. Basically, the UK has 3 carriages, and this is the one that's most commonly used because the others are kept for coronations.
That's right. Yeah. No, it was an extraordinary moment.
You're quite tall.
There.
Was it
Uncomfortable?
I think for the other people who were there with me, yes.
How
But
many people
for
were
me,
with you?
there were four of us in there. I was perfectly comfortable. It does have the most extraordinary carpet, which is the deepest carpet I've ever seen on anything. Which is
Did you
very,
take your
very
shoes off? Sorry.
and it's a lovely thing, and I'm a great privilege to be in there.
Lord Mayor, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for listening to this week's In the City from Bloomberg. This episode was hosted by me, Francine Lacqua, and Allegra Stratton. It was produced by Summer Sadi. Production support from Moses Andam. Sound design by Blake Maples. Brendan Francis Newman is our executive producer. Sage Bauman is head of podcasts. Special thanks to Lord Mayor Alderman Alastair King. Please subscribe, rate, review wherever you listen to podcasts.